This video is going to address Roman mosaics. We saw some mosaics in the Hellenistic period when we were looking at Macedonia, and those were pebble mosaics, like the ones you see on the right here. The Romans would use tesserae, singular tesserae plural, these square cut stones in order to make their mosaics. And they would make spectacular mosaics, just unparalleled uh, up to that time in history. Now, I will talk about some of the mosaics from Pompeii, which are the ones that I want you to know. However, please, but I will show you some other ones from elsewhere in the Roman world, just to give you an idea of the sophistication of these. Now, first of all, we have some with geometric patterns. Uh, and these would cover the floor. All these mosaics, by the way, are on floors. They think of them sort of like rugs, where you could they give texture and color to the room and add a lot to it. And I like this wonderful geometric pattern on this one because it sort of tricks the eye. It has sort of a three-dimensionality to it, which you don't know, well, which blocks are vertical and which blocks are horizontal. Are they the blue ones, are they black ones, or the white ones? Or the sides of the cubes, I should say. Reminds me somewhat of the modern 20th century painter M.C. Escher, who would do these things where he would try to trick your eyes so you could see these things in a number of different ways, depending on what you focused your eye on. And we get other wonderful geometric patterns like this one with it's sort of a starburst within a circle, and then between the rays we get those little squares with alternating black and white. Or this really spectacularly intricate one where the eyes just sort of starts almost see this thing going in a circle, and then they focus in on the emblem of this male figure, the head of a male figure. Just extraordinary pieces of work. Now, back in Pompeii, one of the ones we find, and these are actually fairly common, are these dog mosaics. And they frequently will say on them the Latin cave canem, which just means beware of dog. I like this one a lot because the dog is coming towards us down to the, from the upper left to the lower right. The foreshortening on the front of the dog is not that good, is not as good as it could be to give it more depth. But the change of the ground line does that. We can see that the leash is held onto it, and it has that red leash and then some sort of white leash as well. Notice the red mosaics used for the tongue. And then just look at these little squares around the animal and the leash, where they go in a sort of a different pattern than the rest of them. And notice the nice white line on the belly that makes the back left leg separate from the body. And these were same reason, used for the same reason we use these today, the beware of dog signs. And these would just be mosaics that were put on the front walkway of a house. We also get these nice portraitures of women. We saw those interesting ones in the wall paintings of women readers. But look at how the detail on this one is just spectacular, with the red lips, and then the light brown sort of tan skin, and then the texture in her hair, where we can see every sort of ripple and fold in it, and then the necklace around her neck and her clothing, and just the intricacy is just monumental. It's just, well, monumental is the wrong word. It's just delicate and very refined. The how many tesserae were used for this? Well, many thousands to make this woman's portrait. For example, look at the white line that comes down the right side of her nose that helps give it depth and acts as if that's where the light source is coming from. And we can see that on the right part of her right eye as well. And then on her lower lip, We can see the light reflecting there. A hint of her two top teeth. So it really looks like we're getting a posed a portrait here, and she looks over our shoulder. And just wonderful detail. The next one is an emblema um, uh, of on the top, a cat, a little kitten attacking some sort of bird there, and it's sort of cute in a gruesome way as it fights with it. The cat is somewhat in the position as we saw our leashed dog, but here it fights with the birds, and then below we see some, I think, ducks there sitting above a whole bunch of shell food. And so we can see some sort of dinner there. We can see the ducks, the shells of the of the mussels on the left, and some fish lying out on the right. So they get an idea of dinner. Once again, look at all the bright colors and the delicacy of these tiny, tiny tessera that are positioned beside each one. This one's a sort of a fun emblem, and it shows all these different sea creatures, as if we were standing on a glass-bottom boat and looking down at a whole bunch of fish. Now, these are all done so well that fish specialists, can identify all the species, and we get a whole bunch of different species. Look, on the sort of top center, we have that roundish stingray-looking one. On the right-hand side, we got that little squid. In the middle, we have a wonderful battle between an octopus and a lobster. The Mediterranean lobsters, by the way, are not like the lobsters we're used to in New England. And they're sort of more purplish and thorny, not as meaty as the ones here in the North Atlantic. But then an eel there, and these various other fish. Here, let's look at a detail of it, just to give you an idea of, look at all those many little squares there, and look at how they show on the top of the fish on the right and on this eel sort of one on the left. They show the sort of glistening of their, of the sort of oily skin that fish have. We're alternating white and gray and brown there, and it reflects quite well. I should add one of the interesting things about these mosaics. When you go to see them in situ at the site, if you're lucky, the guard will take out a bucket of water and throw it over them. And when they are wet, the colors just jump out at you. It's just astonishing. But here we can see these are done so well that, as I said before, these species can be identified. And just look at how tiny all these little tesserae are. And here's a nice, fun example. This one is not from Pompeii, but it's a type that's quite common on floors. And what it is it shows, sort of the scraps of food that would have been thrown on the floor after a dinner party. Now, I don't know if that's what really happened or not, but they're sort of fun. Notice the shadows shown around some of these. But then we get the fish bones in the middle there, and everything's been chewed up or eaten, and these are just the scraps left over and thrown on the floor. So this is sort of a fun mosaic you might have in your dining room. Here's another example. This one's from North Africa. Similar thing. In the center there we have the tail of a shrimp of some sort. To the right of that we have a peel of some sort of a vegetable or fruit. To the left, half an eggshell, a head of a fish there on the upper left, and just other food scraps that would have been thrown around onto the floor as one were eating. And we have a good idea from a little bit later mosaic, not much later, a little bit later mosaic of a symposium. And here you can see all the scraps on the floor, and the little cat there on the bottom center right sort of taking advantage of it. I don't know how true this is, and I guess it's a possibility that could be a mosaic underneath those tables. But we can see here all the men reclining in a large triclinium, eating and drinking and talking and gesticulating and reaching their hands out to the tables to grab various bits of food. The guy on the lower right there is the wine server. He's filling up cups of wine to take around. The guy in the center is probably talking to the whole crowd, giving a speech, because as I discussed earlier, the symposia were meant for debates, and hence that's how we use the word till this very day. But the Romans mixed them up with drinking parties, or the Greeks and the Romans. We get this interesting one that shows a cockfight. Um, Here, the tesserae are pretty large, so we can see them stick out there. But they do tell us of something that unfortunately, the Romans did as well. And it's in front of a little table there that has some nice depth to it, and even a little bit of a shadow underneath it, and with a vessel on top. The Notice that the cock's feet are given depth by the ground line there and by the shadows underneath. So the one on the right, as it lifts its talons, it goes into the white area. So that gives us an idea of, it helps send the idea of depth. And then we get these intertwining lines around it, which are a nice decorative motif. Another interesting mosaic that was found are these young women in bikinis at the beach. Um, and they play ball, they run around. The one on the bottom left has one of those spinning things that I forget what you call them, but they're again popular right now with students. They're smaller, but this one would be made to spin from the wind. Um, and Here's a nice one on the right. On the right, there's a detail of it. Notice the leather ball that they're passing back and forth. Look at the different colors on it. So it's a really an interesting detail of this. Um, Interestingly enough, the Romans had bikinis, and then they were reinvented basically in the middle of the 20th century. And I don't know what the Romans called them, but the reason we call bikinis is that the French designer named them that after the Bikini Islands, which had just been blown to smithereens by nuclear bomb tests or atom bomb tests. And so, in dedication of those islands, uh, which probably had nice beaches, he named them that. But we see, the more things change, the more they stay the same. However, this was, as far as I know, just a Roman style and then a modern 20th century style. And here's another example this is from another detail from another part of it. And notice the young woman on the left seems to have little hand weights to exercise there. What the woman on the right's doing, I'm not sure, but I believe she's beating on a drum there, so they could be dancing to that. And notice that she has her necklace and bracelets and armlet on, and her hair pulled up, and her earrings still. While the woman on the left has none of that and has her hair hanging loose. So we just get a daily life feel for this. And this is an interesting picture, obviously a bit old, but taken of a model on top of this mosaic. But it shows that these are life size, which is quite interesting. Just to show the skill of these mosaic makers. Now, I want to take us to a place called Zeugma, here on the Euphrates in southern central Turkey. Zeugma just means sort of the connecting place. Now, this site was flooded out, quite frankly. The Turks built a huge dam, and it was getting flooded out. And so they sent some rescue excavators to go there to dig things up before it gets flooded by this dam of the Euphrates. And lo and behold, they found the site with the richest amount of frescoes at any site that's known. Something like 1,700 square meters, maybe feet, but in any case, a lot of floor space. And these things had to be excavated really quick and lifted, before the flooding came. And literally, the archaeologists, the waters were lapping up against the excavation trenches as they excavated. It's really interesting. This was being dug in the mid 1990s. I just gotten a sort of part-time job then, and a friend of mine was the director of the British School in Ankara in Turkey, and he invited me over for this project in the middle of the school year because it had to be done immediately, and they were paying people to dig. Now, trust me, I've never been paid a cent to excavate. This is always volunteer work. At most, you get your room and board and flight paid for. But he offered to pay me. Then there was a huge foundation of, I forget if it was Getty Money or who, that was paying for the excavations of these wonderful mosaics. I just got this job though, and I could not just pack up and leave in the middle of the semester, or I would have certainly gotten fired. But look at these wonderful colors, and notice how these circles of the portraits. I believe these are of the nine muses. How the lines that wrap around them are different, and they intertwine, and it's just a really, really well done mosaics and wonderful colors. And here you can see that they did pour water. The guy on the left has the bucket of water. The guy in the center is sort of washing it over. And if you look on the lower left, you can see what the mosaic looks like without water. But when you put the water on it, boy, the colors just jump out at you. And here we see a subject we've seen before of Eros and Psyche, these young lovers here. And here they recline on a couch, their feet put up on this footstool here, with good foreshortening of their knees and feet to give it nice depth. There's a gold cantharos, it's a vessel on our left there, sitting on the table. With shaded, with the light coming from sort of behind us, behind to our right against it and glittering off it. And we can see that light shown on Eros's body on his left or right side, as well as Psyche's body. And here they just sit on the couch, and he has his arm around her, and they seem to be talking. But once again, just the depth is excellent. Notice the decoration around it, which shows these sort of columns or pillars sort of jumping out at us and giving great three-dimensionality. And then beyond that, there's these fruits and floral decorations that go around that. Just really, really spectacularly well done. Another one from that site is Dionysus fighting the Indians. Dionysus originally came from India, at least in the Greek mythology. Why he is fighting the Indians? Well, he was chased out. Notice the sort of palm trees around it, so giving it sort of an eastern feel. He stands above the Indian who holds a shield, and he is about to attack, and he lunges forward. There is a man who's already down, and then a woman behind Dionysus, who we saw in the similar portrayal of a woman in the wall paintings. Remember that one of Aeneas getting his leg repaired by Iapix, his doctor, and then Venus on the upper left watching on. Well, and so we see the same idea with the cape of this woman in the Dionysus mosaic. But also we can see the trees floating in the back to give it depth, and the change in color of the ground line as well. A lot of these got lifted and were put in this museum at Gaziantep. But here, just to give you just the sheer amount and size of these mosaics is just extraordinary. This shot taken from the second floor. I've not been to this museum, unfortunately. But I have been to the Madrid Archaeological Museum, and they have some great mosaics there as well. This is just one of the several mosaic rooms. I just showed to you just to give you an idea of how large these are. The ones that are hanging on the wall would have been originally on the floor. I like the one in the back right there, and it has a calendar, and those are all the 12 months on the bottom half of it, and the top half just has a geometric design. Now, to get to a really important mosaic, all this build-up gets us to a really important mosaic that is at Pompeii, and it's very important for reasons I'll explain in a moment. First of all, it's a representation of Alexander's victory against Darius III at Issus. Remember from an earlier lecture, I told you that when Alexander the Great left Greece to conquer the Persians, there were three great battles. And they were at Granicus, Issus, and it should say Gaugamela. It says it's above that place called Arbela, but doesn't say it there. And then it shows Alexander's route. Now, the Issus battle was the second battle, and it was famous because um, Alexander was known for his lightning fast attacks, and he attacked with his cavalry so quick that Darius had to flee, and he had to flee so fast that he lost his wife and children to Alexander, which is a great humiliation. Now, this mosaic was found at Pompeii. I'm just showing you this picture. It's not a very good picture, but I'm showing it to you because there's a person in it to give you an idea of the size. And here's a better shot of it. We can see Alexander on the left on his horse, above sort of that missing that area there. And to the right is Darius, who reaches out for a comrade of his that has fallen. Notice behind him all the pikes, those long poles, are going against Alexander, but Alexander is charging in, and it shows that he's sort of taking the lead. It doesn't have much of a background to it, just that dead tree, but perhaps that's because there was warfare there and it's destroyed. Notice the different shades in the ground lines, or in the ground, showing shadows and helping to give it depth. Now, I need to point out that this was a point of the battle called the strophe, the turning point. And this was what was considered very important, and they like to depict because this is the point at which the battle turned. And they used to stack up the weapons and armor of the enemy who was defeated at that very point. And from that, we get the word trophy. The S has been dropped, and it holds, frequently something that represents the sport that was played. But it comes from this moment. And here's Darius reaching out with his hands, and we see his Persian headdress and his eyes wide open because he's frightened that his men are being killed by Alexander, who charges in. Now, here's a detail of his face, and look at all the tesserae there, and his mouth agape. But notice on his cheeks how the goes from dark brown to light brown to white in order to show the light and give it depth. Look at his eyes, how the little bit of white tube tesserae at each eye sort of come in towards the pupil there. And then the hair blowing back, giving it the feel for a lot of action and movement. And the horses shown here winning, in excitement because they're being turned around really quick. Because they have to get away from Alexander. And the men behind them putting their hands on their head, they can't believe they're going to lose. And notice the guy beneath. He has been trampled by the horses as they get turned around too fast. Also notice the wonderful decoration in their bridles. These were royal horses. One of my favorite portions of this is this guy here who's also about to be trampled over by the horses. He's fallen on his back. His scabbard and sword have fallen behind him, and they lay there. And we don't see his face, his real face. We only see it reflected in the back of his shield as he holds his shield up to protect himself from the onslaught of the horses. Now, the Italians are wonderful conservators, and they made a copy of this to put it back in place in situ in front of the house where it was found, so they can keep the original in the museum. And in their research, they noticed that they learned that the different copy, and here are some more details, and what it looks like in situ in front of the house on the lower left. And so with that, we will end Pompeii and move on to Trajan.